Bom dia a todas e a todos. Hoje, dia 27 de setembro de 2023, estamos iniciando a programação do terceiro dia da nossa Semana Internacional, este ano com o tema O Mundo na Ponta da Língua. Lembro a todos que o evento é online, mas todas as atividades ficam gravadas no YouTube do CEFET-MG. Nossa atividade de hoje is called Language Focus, WhatsApp, Conversational Language in English, Small Talk and Idioms. Basic Intermediate is the level. So I will introduce our fellow. Her name is Liz Ging, and she is a language educator from Boston, Massachusetts, with 15 years of experience working in community education, language institute, and higher education settings. She currently works at CEFET-MG through the English Language Fellow Program, a partnership with the U.S. Embassy in Brazil. She earned an MA in Applied Linguistics from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, with a specialization in foreign language pedagogy and a BFA in 3D Fine Arts from the Massachusetts College of Art. Her experience with language teacher education has included projects with the Universidade de Caxias do Sul and the Universidade Federal do Pampa, among other institutions. Her areas of interest include the role of emotion in language learning. Look, the subject. Emotion in language learning, teacher cognition, and teacher education preparation. Good morning, Liz. How are you?
Good. How are you doing? Good morning.
Fine. Now I invited Liz Ging to present her activity.
Wonderful. So thank you very much, Christina, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. Hello. How are you all doing? Just to give a little bit of a recap here, we're talking this morning about social language in English. The target level for this activity is basic and intermediate students, but of course anybody can participate, just so you have an idea of what to expect. So just before I go into my presentation that I prepared for everyone, I have a few kind of comments just to prepare you a little bit. One thing that's very important is that social language is always dependent on context. So the things I'm going to present are just a few of the many, many possible options for these type of interactions and situations. Something else that's important is that because social language is based on context, my perspective is relevant to my life experiences. I'm from the United States. I'm from specifically the Northeast of the United States, as was mentioned, from Boston, Massachusetts. And so my perspective on this topic is shaped partially by that. The topic of, British social language and other varieties of English, for example, Australia and Ireland and Nigeria, different parts of the world is really fascinating, but it's beyond what we can talk about right now. Okay, so just a little preparation kind of statement for you about that. So I think first, I want to just show you guys my plan. What are we going to talk about in the hour that we have this morning? So just one moment while I share my screen with you. Hold on. And hold on one sec. Just give me one moment here. Reopening the file. Okay. Great. So, conversational language and small talk in English. And here is the plan for everybody. So, we had our introduction and welcome. We also are going to talk about the following list of topics here. So, greetings and pleasantries, handling confusion in conversation, how to clarify when you don't understand something, I think is really important function in a conversation. Small talk, eating together, language around food and those kind of experiences, and how to end a conversation. So obviously, these are just a few of the many, many topics that make up conversational language. But I do hope these topics will be useful and interesting for you. And during the presentation, I do invite everyone to please use the chat. I have it open on my cell phone next to me. So I will try to keep an eye on the chat. If you want to put questions there, if you want to share comments there, and you can also feel free to ask questions at the end, of course, if you prefer. So that is the plan. And we're going to start with greetings and pleasantries. So, greetings. I started with the most basic things that I think everybody here probably already knows. Hi, hey, and hello. Just to give you a little orientation to how I've colored things here. I have 3 colors of text in some of the slides. Things that are in black text are standard language, basic language that's not formal, it's not informal, it's just kind of regular and basic. The blue text are things that are more formal, and the green text are things that are more informal. And of course, it all depends on the context. I'm probably going to say that 100 times in this hour. But as for greetings, I included the basics. Hi, hey, and hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Of course, there are other greetings. These are, I think, the most common ones. I highlighted that hey is a little bit more informal, right? And that good morning, good afternoon, and good evening are the more formal greetings. And maybe I can ask a question for people in the chat. These expressions, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because they are a little more formal in English than in other languages, what type of situations do you think it's typical to hear these phrases? Any ideas in the chat? Maybe you can type your thoughts. Where do you hear people say hello by saying good afternoon, for example? And I can also tell you my opinion, of course. But if you want to share an answer, feel free to use the chat, guys. I would say it's most typical in work and school situations. When you are in a slightly more formal environment. I see Beatrice wrote in the chat, when you're arriving, of course, yeah, of course, when you're arriving. Clara wrote in work meetings. This is a great example. And Thales, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You said in presentations and lectures. Yes, definitely. Academic environments and professional environments. And at the beginning, usually, right? That's typical. There's a few other expressions that are common to hear when you first meet someone in some kind of social situation. So I have, it's been a while and it's been so long. When there's an absence, right? When there's a time where you don't see someone, you know, normally, for example, you study together with your friend and then they're in a different course and you don't see them for, I don't know, a few weeks. And normally you see each other every day. You say, oh my God, it's been a while. Yeah, it just means it's been a long time since I saw you. Of course, nice to meet you, very typical when you first meet someone the first time. And I think it's important to contrast that with nice to see you. because nice to meet you, you can really only use the first time, the first day that you meet someone, right? And then after that, you can still use this expression, nice to see you, for any time that you encounter someone. And this expression, it's a little bit more formal, a little bit, I would say, but people do use it with friends as well as more formal situations like work meetings or events. Great to see you, also very typical. And I put at the bottom here, surprise, surprise, with this intonation, surprise, surprise. When you see someone and you don't expect to see them, and oh, wow, this person is here. I didn't expect to see you here. Surprise, surprise. And this is, of course, an informal expression, so really only appropriate to use with friends and, of course, people you already know well, in a more informal kind of tone. And there's a few more comments in the chat, guys. I'm just going to take a peek. So Beatrice said, oh, this is an interesting kind of a cross-cultural comment. Beatrice said in the chat, in Brazil, it's usual to say these greetings to unknown people when you get into a place, for example, an elevator. And I think that's an interesting kind of difference with a lot of English language contexts. It's not so common to do that, for whatever reason. I can't give you the historical and cultural reasons for that right now. But there's different social customs in different parts of the world, right? Um, and actually, it's something I find that I really enjoy here, that these pleasantries are so common in those kind of situations. But in the US, it's less frequent, I would say. Of course, it depends on your personality. So people, I think we're going to move along here and go to the next slide, which is greetings and pleasantries continued with typical conversation starting questions. And again, I bet you have heard these questions before. Yes. The most standard ones. How are you? How are you doing? This is a little more informal. Yes. There's many other expressions. And I think a great place to hear these expressions is, for example, TV series and movies where there's a lot of dialogue. You can hear all kinds of different variations of these questions. How's it going? How's everything going? All these kind of things. I put the typical answers here, fine, okay, all right, is a little more informal, means okay. Good and great. I think those are the most common ones. And then there's also some less positive answers. And I wanted to mention this, guys, because I think typically, hold on, there's a question in the chat. Oh, yes, Julio asked about fine. Well, fine, you know, it's, how can I say? It's the minimum acceptable. You're okay. I'm fine, but I'm not more than that. You know what I mean? Just kind of all right, I would say. Like, it's in the middle. It's in the middle of the scale. We have great or wonderful or excellent or awesome is very good. And then we have some negative answers down at the bottom here. All right and fine and okay are kind of in the middle, I would say. But it's a very polite word to use, fine. It's very typical, yeah. I would say the word all right, you're getting into a little more like questionable. Are you okay? Are you sure? I'm all right. Yeah. And Tale said, you think it depends on the intonation. That's a great observation. So much of this depends on your intonation, your body language, even your relationship with the person, right, can change what these words mean actually in an interaction. I wanted to include as well, guys, here, some of the negative answers because you're not always feeling good, right? Sometimes you have a day that's difficult, that's hard, a day that's not great for you, yeah? And of course, you don't tell that to everyone, but if you're talking to someone that you are close to, like a friend, for example, and you feel comfortable to be honest about how you feel, these are very typical responses. Not so good. not so great. I've been better. And all of these mean like I'm not good right now, but they're kind of a more polite, more gentle, or a little more delicate or indirect way of saying that. And all of these are really common expressions, I would say. Um, and some of the typical responses I've put here, because if someone asks you, "How are you?" and you say, "Not so good," the person is going to ask you what happened. It's an indication that you want to talk about it, basically. So don't use these phrases if you don't want to talk about what's wrong. But if you do feel comfortable to talk about it with someone, these are all very typical responses. Oh, that's too bad. This is a sympathetic response, very typical for any kind of bad news, including this situation. Also very typical. What's wrong? You know, or what happened? And of course, what happened is about an event. What's wrong is a little more generic. For example, what's wrong? Oh, I'm sick today. What's wrong? I'm so tired. What's wrong? I had a terrible day at work, or I had a fight with my sister, or something like this. So this is a very typical expression to use. And I put here in blue at the bottom, fine, thanks, and you, because I find a lot of textbooks include this, and this is totally fine to say, of course. It's just a little more formal in tone, but perfectly fine to use, and very common with like strangers and people you don't know well if you're speaking to them in public for some reason. This more formal expression is very typical. So here's what I'm going to ask, guys. I have a question for you. How are you doing today? In the chat. How are you doing? Tell us, how are you doing today? And I will look for your answers in a moment. So Julio is great. We love to hear it. Anybody else? Walter is great as well. I'm happy to hear that. We love an exclamation point remark. I'm also good, guys. I'm good. It's very warm, but I'm doing fine. Clara said she's doing fine. Beatrice, you said you're excited today. Oh, that's great. I hope whatever you're excited about goes really well. That sounds wonderful. So, people, I'm going to keep moving. Okay. I'm going to another question. Very typical question. But I find sometimes there is some confusion about this question. Talis, I see your answer slowly melting with the heat, but okay. Me too. So guys, I want to talk about this question, what's up? I think this is important to mention because sometimes there's some misunderstanding about how to answer this question. I just as a teacher, this is my observation. Sometimes people interpret this question as like, how are you? And yeah, it's related to how are you. But what's up is usually a question about your current, so now, your current location, your current status, or your activities. It's kind of like what is happening? What is going on? What is happening with you? So, for that reason, it's not typical to answer with a minimal short answer like these ones. I'm fine, I'm good, I'm fine, thank you. You usually give more information when someone asks you what's up. And again, there are no rules about this. You can say, I'm fine, I'm good, but you need to complement it usually with more information. For example, I'm good, I'm at work. I'm fine, I'm pretty busy right now, I'll call you later. I'm fine, I'm on the bus, where are you? I'm good, I'm just at home studying. So you have information about the location. I'm at work, I'm on the bus, I'm at home, or you have information about the activity. I mean, at work, presumably the person is working. um, the person is on the bus, so they're traveling on the bus, or the person is studying. So location, activities, or more information about your status, like what's happening right now. I'm busy. Okay, I can imagine like you're at school or you're at work or you're driving or something like this. Hopefully you're not driving and texting. Um, but these are really common responses, you know. It's typically information about what's happening with you right now. Also, in green here, not much. What about you? This is if you really don't have much happening, nothing is going on, you have nothing to say. This is very typical. People often say, not much, what about you? It's the most common brief answer. You don't have to give more information if you don't want to, you don't have time, you can't be on the phone right now. Very, very common. So typically, what's up is about where are you? Or how are you doing in a little more detailed kind of way? Or what are you doing? What activities are happening for you right now? So my question for you guys is what's up? And you can answer in the chat. Where are you? What are you doing? What's up? I'm going to give the chat a minute to see what you all have said. Beatrice is working right now. Julio is making the class happen. I'm so glad that you are. We really appreciate this. All the technological assistance is so important. Anybody else? Take a look here. Let's see. Okay. Everyone else is watching the presentation. Okay, so what's up? And these examples that people gave are actually very typical responses, so that's really nice to see. Next thing, guys. Clara is also working. Nice. Yeah. Walter, you said you're going to be in your house all day. This is another very typical response. Explaining a little bit about right now and also the immediate future is very typical when people ask, what's up? You're going to be at home all day. So the next thing that I have for you guys is a little bit of information about handling confusion in a conversation, because there's a lot of ways to be confused. You can have confusion in a conversation for so many reasons. Number one, you did not hear the person. Maybe there's a lot of noise, you're in a busy place, and you couldn't hear. And you're like, what? Okay, this is number one. Number two, you can be confused maybe because of the language. If you're communicating in a foreign language, English maybe for some of you in this case, it could be confusion about the language, about the vocabulary, about an expression that you don't recognize. And the third reason is maybe you understood everything the person said. You understood everything, the words, but you don't understand the message. You don't understand what the person is trying to communicate to you, and you want some clarification from them. There's many different phrases you can use. Again, I'm suggesting the most common ones in my experience. So we have here, can you repeat that? And could you repeat that? This is a little more formal sounding with could. This structure, guys, with can and could, I super recommend if you feel at all reluctant to use this or confused about this topic. Very, very, very important for social language in English, because the polite question structures like this, can you, could you, also would you, can I, could I, may I, we're not talking about all that today. Those questions are very, very typical, very frequent, and I would say they're essential for polite social language in English. So if you want someone to repeat something, it's very typical to ask in this way. Can or could you repeat that? Another possible thing you could say is, can you say that again? Or could you say that again? Very common. Of course, you're just paraphrasing the word repeat. Say that again, yes. However, I want to recommend, guys, one phrase that is so common in informal conversation. This is a colloquial expression, informal expression. It's in green. What was that? I have never seen this phrase in a textbook, in an English textbook. I am waiting for the day that I see a textbook that includes this expression, because I think what was that is one, if not the most common way to request repetition in a conversation, you know? Because what was that? You're asking the person, like, what was that? That here is your speech, your comment. What was it that you said? Is basically what this question is. Um, so I super recommend this question. I think it's not so common in more formal situations because it's very direct, you know. So just be cautious. Use it with informal conversation. Um, and finally, I just put at the bottom here, use caution with the phrase repeat or repeat please. And the reason I'm saying this, you can see it's in blue, and the blue means it's more formal. Yes. Um, these phrases, they are used sometimes in English. I would say most typically in academic situations, specifically in language classes. They're actually really common. But outside of the classroom, it's quite, from my perspective, this is just me talking, but it's quite unusual to hear this in a social conversation. Um, and I would just say, you know, use caution, be careful, because when you say to someone, repeat, please, it's correct, you know, it's grammatically correct, that's fine. But it has a demanding tone in English because this is an imperative, right? It's a command or an imperative. And just structurally and also socially, I think we can say English makes less use of imperative structures than many other languages. Of course, we have imperatives. We do use command forms, but it's less common in interpersonal communication. That's, you know, this social language. So I would just encourage you to be careful with this expression, and listen in different types of situations to different types of conversations and see what you hear. Um, I think sometimes it's difficult to hear examples of this in the media, you know, in movies and TV shows, because often dialogue in shows and movies does not include phrases like this. But you know, still make an effort to listen for some examples. I'm just saying it might be difficult to hear examples of this at times. Um, and Tales commented about the word pardon. Yes, the word pardon is also used to request clarification in a conversation. I would say it's more typical with British English speakers, but definitely pardon is used. I think it's a little more formal sounding, and that's why it might be a bit less frequent, you know. But it's a good option to have as well, you know. I think my suggestion, guys, is to have a repertoire, have a variety of different phrases you can use. The formal ones, the informal ones, more frequent and common language, and also more unusual ones, to give variety and diversity to your communication. So, final piece about greetings and pleasantries. I also wanted to include these questions. How have you been? How have you been doing? And what have you been up to? Very common conversational questions to ask. What have you been doing recently? This is the important word, which is not part of the question. It means in the recent past. What were you doing? Maybe yesterday, maybe this week, maybe last week, last month. It depends on when is the last time you saw the person, you know. So if I ask my friend, how have you been? and I saw her a week ago, I'm asking about last week. If I ask my friend, how have you been doing? And I have not seen her for a year, I'm asking about that whole time period. So it's a very common type of question. And typically, how have you been doing? People often answer with, I've been good, I've been okay, I've been busy, I've been working a lot. You can give activities here as well. Okay. And a more informal answer is something like, how have you been doing? Doing good, doing okay, doing all right, and so forth. What have you been up to is a similar idea. This is a more idiomatic expression. It's a colloquial expression, more informal. And usually the answer to this is you explain your recent activities. And that can be in the past, that can be until now. You can answer in many, many different ways. For example, what have you been up to? I was working last night. What have you been up to? I've been studying all the time. I've been so busy. I was out of town last week. So again, it's in reference, it's relative to the last time you talked to or saw this person, you know. So many different possible ways to answer. And I'm going to ask you guys in the chat, what have you been up to recently? Today, yesterday, last week? What have you been up to? And you can put it in the chat for us. Please. I'm just going to give everyone a moment to think it over and maybe put an example for us. And give it a moment. So we have a few people answering. Walter said he's been studying a lot. Clara has been working and playing something Gate 3 in your free time. I'm assuming that's a video game, maybe? Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know what that is, guys. Someone can tell me in the chat. Oh, Beatrice commented about the weather. Very typical. You've been uncomfortable because of the heat. I think all of us have been. Talis said you've been trying to pick up your reading. All of these are really typical kinds of responses. So if someone asks you, what have you been up to? That's a common answer, yes. And Julio said you've been streaming Semana Internacional 2023 events and studying to apply to a master's degree in postlingy. Oh, that's exciting, Julio. I didn't know that. Good luck. And Bruno said you've been busy studying and working. So have we all. So guys, I'm going to move on and I'm going to go to the topic of small talk. Now, small talk, just in case anyone is not familiar with this expression, it refers to light, social conversation with someone you don't know or that you don't know well, you know? So small talk could be with someone in a public place, like in a supermarket or at a bus stop, and small talk could also be with someone you know, like a coworker, but you're not like a good friend of that person. You know their name and their job, or maybe a student that's in your course at school. You know their name and you know what they're studying, but that's all you really know. So you don't have a lot of context in common with this person is kind of the challenge. And the purpose of small talk is generally to be polite, to show an interest in that person, and to initiate connections with people because, you have to meet people somehow, right? You're not just friends immediately. And I should make a comment as well, guys, that, small talk is very different in different cultural environments. So a lot of what I'm going to say and the examples I'm going to give are particularly common in North American English. Okay. And small talk may or may not lead to more involved conversation. It may or may not lead to friendship or some more of a connection with that person. Maybe, maybe not. And I wanted to put a few of the common kind of strategies that people often use in small talk in English language environments. It's very typical to give someone a compliment and ask them a question. Things like, I like your glasses. Are they new? I love your shoes. Where did you get them? That bag is really cool. Where is it from? Again, these are kind of superficial examples, but sometimes small talk conversations are a little bit superficial, right? And all of these examples are kind of about accessories or clothing. Of course, you can give someone a compliment on something else, as long as it's appropriate to the social situation that you're in, right? Two other strategies that people often use are kind of open-ended questions that also require little context in common with the person. So, how was your weekend? This is probably small talk question number one. And anybody who is a student in one of my classes, there's I think a few people in the chat who are students in my classes. They may realize or remember that I have used this, how was your weekend, as a warm-up activity in English classes sometimes. No, because it's a frequent question, yes. It's an easy warm-up activity to do with students that encourages people to converse, yes. But also because this is very, very frequent. I would say in all types of social situations, at school, at work, in a social environment like a party or an event, this is kind of a go-to question for a lot of people, very frequent. Um, Another question, if you have a context with that person, some environment in common, like a school environment, a workplace, or a neighborhood, how long have you worked here? How long have you studied here? How long have you lived here? Now, this is a little different. It's kind of a closed question, right? Because how long is, oh, I've worked here for a year. I've lived here for 6 months. It's a closed question, but generally the person will encourage the person to talk a little bit more, ask some follow-up questions. This is very common. So how long have you? Whatever. These are just the most typical examples. Of course, you can ask about other things. Um, Also, what do you like about something that we both know about? What do you like about this program if you're in an academic course with someone? What do you like about this neighborhood if it's someone who is, living near you? You could ask about many things. What do you like about this thing that we both know about? Because that encourages the person to give their opinion about something. Finally, it's also very typical to ask for advice or an opinion about a topic that you can both give your thoughts about. You can be very direct and say, what's your opinion about whatever? Or you can use some of these a little more indirect phrases. What are your thoughts about something? For example, what's your opinion about the Semana Internacional events? What are your thoughts about those events? Did you participate? Oh, yes, I went to this presentation. Oh, yes, me too. Ba, ba, ba. You see what I'm saying? How do you feel about? And you can ask about the course, about the location, about the neighborhood, about the restaurant across the street, whatever. The weather, very typical one. And can you recommend? This is asking someone for advice, of course. And this is very common when you, again, when you study or work in the same place or live in the same area as someone, and you need a recommendation for something. Or maybe you don't need it, but you're using it to start a conversation with someone. Can you recommend a pharmacy near this school? Can you recommend a restaurant where I can go have lunch or something like this? So very typical. Um, let's see, guys. Here's what I think we're going to ask. I'm going to ask everyone in the chat. Oh, there's a question in the chat. Felix Alfredo asked, are you from? I think the question is, am I from Brazil? No, I'm not. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. But I am very much enjoying living in Belo Horizonte. Tales also commented in the chat and said, can you recommend is one of my favorites because it allows the person to talk about what they like and it gives new things to do and explore. Yeah, I agree with you, Tales. It's a very productive question, thinking like strategically. But it's also interesting and like fun, you know. I think it's a fun question. And you learn something new about the person, which is wonderful as well. So, guys, I'm going to ask everyone a question in the chat. How was your weekend? The most common one. We'll use the most common question. You can tell us, how was your weekend? I'm going to give everyone a moment in the chat. And Walter said the weekend was great and also warm. It certainly was. Yes. Very warm. And it bears saying, guys, too, that the weather is, of course, a very, very typical small talk topic as well. Anybody else? Let me take a look. Give it a moment. Okay. We're going to leave it at that, guys. We're going to move on to the next question. For the next question, the next topic. A few other things. Some notes about language for eating together with other people. I want to comment on something here. Let's see. I'm looking at the chat, guys. Tyler's went to the medieval event. You know, I saw an advertisement for that. I thought it sounded cool. I'm glad you had a good time. It was awesome. Clara said, I spent a lot of time playing games and eating ice cream. Reasonable activities for the weekend. Very nice. Well, people, I'm going to move on to this topic about eating together with others. And I wanted to clarify a little bit that the language I'm including here, some of it is appropriate for any situation where you're eating with other people. But some of these expressions are more typical when you're eating in someone's home. So you're eating in someone's apartment, or you're sitting in their kitchen, or they cook dinner for you. Some of these phrases are more typical in that context. And I included that because I don't often see these in textbook materials. Usually textbook things focus more on the language of eating out, eating in a restaurant, in a cafe, in a bar. But I think these expressions are great to know as well. So very typical, I mean, let's eat, let's get started. Often at the beginning of a meal, someone will say this. This is very typical when you have a bunch of people, for example, at a party or for a holiday, and people are kind of waiting for someone to begin. You know that moment when all the food is on the table and no one is touching things? Have you experienced that? So very typical to kind of tell people, it's okay, let's start. Help yourself, very typical when someone is indicating like, take what you want, serve yourself. Especially when a meal is for a holiday and all the dishes are on the table that are shared among the people. And the people serving the meal want you to take your own food for yourself. Help yourself is a colloquial expression in that situation. If you are in the house or with someone eating who is religious, of any religion, it's typical to use this expression, say grace. We're going to say grace, or wait, don't eat yet. We're going to say grace. And that refers to praying before you eat, if that's something that you do or that's important to you. Pretty typical expression. And then, you know, can and could, you can see are showing up here again. Can you, could you hand me the salt, the butter, the knife, the glass, the chicken, whatever it is? You want someone to pass something to you. This is the polite way to ask. And of course, could is a little more formal again. And then commenting on the food. These are typical. Of course, you can say 100 different things about a meal. But this is delicious, this is amazing, this is really good, I think are really common ways to compliment someone on the food. Also typical to ask someone for the recipe if you really liked the food and you like to cook. You know, can I have the recipe for the chicken? Can I have the recipe for those potatoes? That was really delicious. A few other things I thought just about, you know, any particular limitations or preferences or restrictions you might have about food. These are common expressions. If you don't eat meat, I'm vegetarian. If you don't eat any animal products, I'm vegan. Yes. Um, if you have a specific food that you don't eat for a medical reason or perhaps a religious reason or other kind of restrictions, it's typical to be very specific. You know, I don't eat pork. I don't eat meat. I don't eat shellfish or shrimp or something like this. Um, and I'm looking in the chat, guys. Ah, okay. The help yourself in Minas is servir. Que não vou servir. Oh, okay. Interesting. I'm learning new things in the chat, guys. Julio, thank you for sharing that. I expect I will hear that phrase at some point. um, I also put allergies in here, guys, at the bottom. I'm allergic to. This is the phrase. Use the verb to be with the adjective allergic and the preposition to. I'm allergic to shrimp. I'm allergic to peanuts. I'm allergic to whatever, if you have an allergy to a food. This is the typical structure. And finally, would you like some more? Is a polite way to offer when usually it's your home or you cooked the food and you want to offer to people to continue, eat more. Of course, you can accept and you can say, yes, please, definitely, or you can decline and you can say, oh, no, thanks, I'm full. Or no, thanks, I'm all set is also typical. It's more informal. All set is informal. Because it means all set, it means I don't need anything else from you, basically, right now. This is a very common expression, all set, used in many different situations. But here it means, no, I don't need more food, but thanks. So, very common expressions, guys. So, some food examples. And then finally, to end, I thought we could talk about ending a conversation. So, some typical ways of ending a conversation, because often people are in small talk, it's about how to start, right? How do you start a conversation with someone? Whether just because socially it's a little, I don't know, awkward or uncomfortable, or I don't know you, or because of the language, maybe you're not sure what phrases or expressions to use. It can be a little confusing. But ending a conversation, we have some examples of typical phrases here. So I have a few formal ones at the beginning. These would be appropriate for academic situations, workplace situations with people you don't know well, talking to someone that is perhaps a superior to you in some way, like your professor or your boss, or in a hierarchical situation, is what I'm saying. Because of that, it's a bit more formal. So very typical to say, oh, well, thanks for telling me about the Semana Internacional. Thanks for telling me about the event next week. Thanks for telling me about that restaurant or whatever you talked about. It's also typical to mention something that you enjoyed, especially, again, this is formal. So with someone you don't have a closeness or like an intimacy, uh, friendship kind of intimacy with them, I enjoyed talking with you about the Postling program at CEFET-MG, or I enjoyed hearing about the, competition your group is going to be in. I enjoyed hearing about your weekend or whatever you enjoyed. So these are a little bit more formal. Also, in terms of ending a conversation, a little more informally, it's very typical to mention your own immediate plans. Oh, I've really got to go. I have a class in 10 minutes. I've got to go. This is more informal. My sister is waiting for me. I have to go get the bus. I have work in an hour. Some immediate plan that's kind of soon and gives you a reason to end the conversation. These are typical phrases to introduce that. Also, these expressions at the bottom here, very common, especially when it's not clear how to end the conversation. It's typical to say things like this, oh, I won't keep you. I don't want to keep you any longer. It means I don't want to impede you. I don't want to interfere with your plans, basically. I don't want to hold you up. I've really got to get going. All of these really common expressions. And I would say these ones here, I won't keep you. I don't want to keep you any longer. I don't want to hold you up. These are especially common when you see someone, for example, this situation in the picture here, where the students, it looks like they're students, are out walking somewhere, and you see someone that you know and you talk for a few minutes, and then you need to leave, but you want to say goodbye in a polite way. You know, say, "Oh, well, I won't keep you. Have a good day. See you later." Yeah. I don't want to hold you up. This means I don't want to stop you from where you're going. Yes. So more typical when you're out walking around, traveling, on a bus, waiting for a train, whatever, on your bike or any of those transportation things. I've really got to get going is also a polite but informal way to say I need to leave now. Yeah. Um, Finally, guys, at the bottom, I just put the most typical ones. Bye. See you later, and see you with the time you're going to see them. Yeah. See you on Tuesday. See you next week. See you soon. See you later. See you on Wednesday, whatever. Um, so all of these really typical ways of ending a conversation, and we're going to use that to end this talk. The final thing I have for you guys are some resources. And there's many, many, many resources for conversational language in English, but I selected a few that I think are quite nice. And I have one that is like a beginner or basic level. So if you're at the beginning with English or you want review, I really recommend the story feature on Duolingo, if anybody uses Duolingo. It looks like this. It's the icon of the little book. And I think this is a great feature that often includes conversational language, um, which I think is wonderful. Um, Hello, I don't know if any of you know this website. It looks basically like this image down here. You have a video with audio, of course. You have a transcript of a conversation and then a quiz and vocabulary. And also the speakers have different accents and pronunciation, which is indicated here, and they have conversations about all different types of topics, and they're quite naturalistic type of language. So I think they're really excellent. I recommend this site. And then also a little bit more, I would say high intermediate or advanced, I would recommend this YouTube channel, Speak Confident English. She has a lot of content, especially about work situations, work language in English, but I think it's appropriate for anyone who's using English in an academic environment as well. So I really recommend her channel. Additionally, these links, guys, and the presentation file is going to be shared through Google Drive, and it will be posted later in the link description of this video. So if you want a copy of this presentation later on, the link to the file is going to be inserted into the description file for this video. I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat, guys. Thank you, Junior. That's very kind of you to say that. Clara, you are very welcome. Julio, you like Duolingo stories. I like them too. I think they're a fantastic learning feature that they have. Let's see. The feature is fun. Talia said it was a great class. Thank you. It was incredible to meet you. It was nice to have you guys in the chat. Beatrice, you are most welcome. Guys, I'm going to share. Hold on. I'm not going to share my screen. I'm going to close my screen. Hold on. 1 second. Give me a moment. Okay. And I don't know if there are any other questions or any other comments anyone wants to drop in the chat before we finish. Or if Christina, if you want to say anything, I see you just popped up here as well.
Liz, so good to have this class with you. And thanks a lot for accepting to be with us at Semana Internacional
Of course, my pleasure.
2023. And thank you for telling us so interesting English talks,
Oh,
highlights from
good.
formal and informal conversation.
It
I'm
makes a
trying to
big
use
difference.
the
Yeah.
tips, the expression.
Oh, great. Good. Yeah, I think the
And
formality thing is so important, so.
yes. And besides, it's important to me to say that in a public, that besides being a very good teacher, you are a very friendly person. It's very nice
Oh,
to have you with us
oh,
at
thank you so
CEFET-MG.
much. Well,
Yes,
I'm
it's true.
delighted to be here, guys. I love you
Yeah.
guys. So very happy
Yeah,
to be here.
yes, it's a pleasure for us. And I'd like to announce that next Friday, we'll have Liz Ging again with the topic Culture Focus at the same time. It's another activity at Semana Internacional 2023. E se alguém ainda tiver algum comentário, alguma pergunta, ainda temos alguns minutinhos. Can be in English or in Portuguese.
Sure. Yeah. And I encourage people to come to Friday if you are available. If you're interested in arts and artisan traditions and crafts, that's going to be the topic. And it's something that is really a great interest for me that I'm very enthusiastic to talk about. So please come if you're interested.
For sure, I'll be here.
I know.
Yes, and it's very nice to participate in these so interesting activities. Yesterday we had with our French teacher, and it was very
Great.
nice also. And okay, if let me check if there is any other question. No, I don't think so.
Okay. Great.
And I would like to invite everybody. Esta tarde teremos, então, uma conversa sobre o trabalho do Instituto Confúcio, da UFMG, com Miriam Mansur, que é a diretora brasileira do Instituto Confúcio, e ela é professora da UFMG. E é uma das coisas interessantes que a gente está colocando na programação dessa semana, valorizando mais essa questão asiática, da cultura asiática, que temos percebido que cada vez mais isso tem interessado ao público de maneira geral. Né? Realmente eles estão mais presentes aí no mundo e é interessante conhecer mais da cultura. Então, hoje à tarde teremos essa e às 14h30, nesse mesmo bate-canal. E gostaria de agradecer novamente à diretoria-geral, que tanto nos incentiva e nos dá apoio para a realização de todas as atividades da SRI, e agradecer à SECOM, né, que é a Secretaria de Comunicação, na pessoa do Júlio, que está aí nos bastidores, maravilhoso, tão participativo, né? Inclusive, hoje ele foi muito interativo na conversa, o que foi maravilhoso. So, now we really got to go.
Exactly.
If you want to finish with some words, please, it will be a pleasure.
Sure. I mean, all I would say, guys, to finish is if this topic of the social and conversational aspect of the language is important for you, check out the resources and find the resources that are exciting for you too. My recommendations are only my own, but a lot of students that I've met have learned this kind of language in English in so many different ways, from different TV shows, from movies, from chatting with people in video games, and all kinds of things. So I would just encourage you to connect your English language study with the things that you enjoy, the things that you love. And I think it will be a great help to, move forward with the language and also enjoy the process. So thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of the Semana Internacional.